we're going to kick things off by talking about everybody's favorite subject matter, the state of the comic book industry.
Nice. Let's go. Thriving.
We'll see.
Right?
We'll see. So, there's a tremendous article that was done by Sketched. And they're an online publication and that talks about comics, and
Yeah.
they do like I don't know if it's annual or exactly how often they get into it, but they check in with retailers. And I want to actually shout out I want to shout out the writer, because again, it's a tremendous
David
piece.
Harper.
Thank you, David Harper. I'm going to reference this a lot throughout this conversation because it forms the basis of what we're going to be talking about. I highly encourage anybody who finds this conversation interesting to read the whole thing for yourself. There will be stuff that is left out of this just due to the nature of time. With those things in play, hello and welcome to the show. If you're watching us live, happy to have you guys. Let's get into it. I'm reading directly from it now. Coming off a multi-year high that began in 2020, things were solid when I checked in with comic shops in January. Sales were steady, manga was popping, and other categories had seen growth. While there were points of consternation, healthy numbers can act as a balm for even the most troubled comic retailer's soul. Ultimately, the good outweighed the bad last year. But it was clear there were storm clouds on the horizon, if not there already. It wasn't because sales were down dramatically, or even across the board. It was because everything was harder and more exhausting than it had been before, with several retailers not even understanding how they came out of 2022 ahead. It's like Bruno Batista from Dublin's Big Bang Comics put it at the time, quote, "The uncertainty is bigger than ever for retailers." They were hopeful, of course. Comic retailers are a hardy bunch, passionate individuals eager to do their job and do it well. But doubt was seeping into the picture. Shops were surviving or even thriving in some cases. They just didn't always feel very good about it. If that was the case then the bad vibes have only gotten more pervasive since. Just as before, it isn't because everyone's sales have evaporated. Some shops are level or even up from 2022, albeit fewer than before. It's just a lack of faith in publishing partners and the material itself taking hold, particularly when it comes to single issues. That's for good reason. Much of it isn't working. More than that, the job has gotten harder and the margins tighter. That was more palpable during the boom times of 2021. Higher costs are easier to deal with when everything was selling. But as Joe Field of Concord, California's Flying Colors Comics put it to me, sales shifting back towards pre-pandemic levels, but with post-pandemic costs is, quote, not a recipe for success. That's been a consistent message throughout the year. Much of the positive energy and sentiment has dissipated, replaced with uncertainty and frustration. It's a make or break time in the direct market and one that deserves focus. So, today, we're going to give it just that, as we will be looking at the year so far in comics retail, examining how things are going, what's working, what isn't, amongst a group of retailers as we head into the back half of a year filled with question marks. That is gloomy.
Yeah. Yeah, even off that, like my own personal experience in Britain, coming into the reality of post-Brexit, January hit us like a freight train. I left my job to go to school in September, and now like we are drowning, and it's not just us. So I can only imagine what a comic book retailer is going through, especially when these companies are continually raising prices in the midst of continual escalating financial hardships for everyone.
Yeah, you can't offset those things, and I think even on that end, the retailers have to deal with costs being passed on to them from publishers with the increase in paper stock and just costs associated to transporting goods. So that goes down the line, from them to the retailer to us, and it just makes it much more costly.
Yeah, and I want to say this up front before we continue. This is going to be a bit of a downer look at the industry as it stands right now. But I also want to say that the headline of this article is funny, and I think it's pretty appropriate. It could be better, but it could be worse. It's not as bad as it's been in the past. The situation is not as dire as it's been. Shops are making more money by and large than they were 10 years ago, but that doesn't take into account what you guys talked about, which is rising costs of everything, and interest in comics waning a bit, which you're going to hear about here in just a moment. Referring back to the article, take this line from Brower. Brower is one of the sellers, who said, "While there are certainly winners in today's market, I don't know that there will be big winners anymore. Even the best sellers for us sell a fraction of what best sellers sold in years past." And that's from Patrick Brower out of Challengers Comics and Conversation in Chicago.
And that's damning, because the best sellers even a few years ago were selling a fraction of what they were selling a few years before that.
Continues to diminish.
Yeah.
Diminish and go for it.
I'm so removed from retail stores at this point. Like, I am completely digital, besides the occasional collection that I grab. But even then, I'm getting at those half price websites and stuff. So it is the only, I guess, data I have, whether or not there's new stores opening up near me, and there aren't really. So this is very interesting to me.
Right, and I think that's a good point. Let's talk about how the pandemic impacted the industry, right? We saw a lot of store closures, not as many as we necessarily thought we would, but they did happen. And some people, look, if you live in the Midwest, or if you live in a small town, maybe that shop that you went to it might have been 20 minutes away. It might have been 30 minutes away on a drive. Maybe that was the only shop in a 2-hour radius of you. Or maybe an hour radius. Maybe you don't want to drive an hour. Maybe that's difficult. Maybe you don't have the means of getting to a shop anymore like you used to. That impacts a lot of people that then do what Tyler said. Maybe they go digital. Maybe they decide they're going to buy their books from an online retailer like a Midtown Comics, which is the same as the rich getting richer. Midtown Comics is a dominant retailer in the market. And we have people in our community who order their books directly from them online. And then that's a double dip because Midtown Comics is also Lunar, I believe.
Yeah,
so
distributor.
Yeah. So that's kind of crazy when you think about it. Go ahead.
It's interesting because I actually went to Anyone Comics maybe last week or the week prior, and they actually opened up a new store in Long Island, in Long Island City.
Really?
Called Everyone Comics. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Wow, good for them.
Me neither. And so I haven't yet gone to visit, but I think that's indicative of proximity. There's so many people in New York that volume-wise, and Demetrios, the owner, who we've interviewed, if you guys want to go check out that on the YouTube, but they've been able to grow and he does a good job of catering and bringing you into the store. He does other things, Magic the Gathering, games in the back, and even when I went there last time, there were people in the basement playing some series of board games. So you have to sort of break outside of that box of comics to some degree, but they're lucky enough that they're able to continue to grow and see that growth, and I think it speaks to the individual retailer as well.
That does matter, and I think it's also worth pointing out that the retailers who were interviewed for this are not all the retailers that exist.
Sure.
So every store's experience is going to be different due to the nature of the fact that the stores are run by individuals. You don't necessarily have that in Best Buy because the young teen that sells you DVDs at Best Buy is just that person. Whereas when you go to the local comic shop, the dude that owns that place, they control what you see, what you don't see, the narrative around the books that are available for purchase. Maybe they're racist, maybe they're a douchebag, and you don't want to go anymore. Those factors don't really exist in other bigger types of stores and chains. So let's move forward. Joe Field out of Flying Colors Comics in California said, it's sad to say that everything is down when asked about, sales. What Flying Colors is seeing is a painful combination of fewer people buying and each of those individuals purchasing less. That resulted in a sales dip of 17% so far this year. This is him again, Field. Over the last couple of years, an average transaction would be about $45. And this year, we're running in the $40 range. When you take that drop and then reduce the number of total transactions, that's what gets you to 17% down from 2022 in terms of sales.
It's interesting that from 45 to 40, I also imagine the number of books, because they've seen a smaller decrease in the volume, that also probably means that even though it's a $5 difference, the cost of those books have seen that increase. And so you're getting less volume, but you're still paying out a similar or increased amount. And we've seen that across the board with the spikes of prices.
Atomic Hound points out that DCBS is lunar. Thank you. I appreciate the correction. Look at that. David Acevedo. I got to drive like 40 minutes to an hour.
Damn.
That's rough.
Commitment.
Yeah, that's rough. And that's, I take a train to get to my LCS, and that's like a 30-minute train ride, but there's no gas cost associated with that. So when you factor that in, what David is saying is that if that's both ways, you're talking about a near 2-hour drive. And that and maybe you don't give a damn. Maybe you're like, you know what, it's worth it for me to do that. But is it worth it in gas to do that? That's tough. Now,
imagine doing that commute and then you get something like AXE Judgment Day. Like, it's like
Well, I was
the
about
next
to
one
say,
might not be worth it.
this last week's worth of Pals polls sure wasn't worth the 2-hour trip's gas. Like,
listen, it wasn't worth the cash either. Let me tell you what.
it wasn't even worth the digital codes.
I'll tell you what.
Not for that Infinite Comic Hellfire Gala. That disaster. I broke this out into the next bit, into positives and negatives. I didn't want to just read from the article directly and read comments. I wanted to establish that, yes, there are positives, but there are also negatives. So we're going to go over those, and we're going to break this down. I'm going to start with the positives. And I think a lot of these are predictable. I think a lot of this stuff is stuff we've talked about already. So one clear example, you guys will be obvious. Some stores seeing big numbers for Dawn of DC because the overall quality of books has been higher. It's not just Batman, as Superman books and Green Lantern and others are seeing growth as well. And that was a key throughout this whole article, was that quality content, quality comic books seem to be a bigger driver of sales. We've regaled how good Superman books have been recently. And that quality is actually resulting in greater sales. Look at that. What a big shock. You put good books out, people show up.
Yep.
Wild.
I know, right? Even Batman. I think Batman's been fantastic. The Chip Zdarsky Batman stuff. Even Detective Comics, Ram V. It's exciting. People are into this stuff. Another big hit was Void Rivals #1. And it took something that a lot of creators don't do, but some do, to be fair, but a lot don't, which is that the creative team put the work in to call retail shops and let them know what was going to happen in the book. Obviously, we know now Void Rivals debuted the Energon universe, which is the shared universe with Transformers and G.I. Joe, the Hasbro stuff. They called retailers to let them know. One retailer said, I was ready to order 25 copies of this comic book before they called me. I ordered 100. I have 15 left. That's tremendous.
Not bad.
That's great. That sucks that they creators had to be the ones calling. Like, well,
I mean,
that's the image thing also. Is, you know,
Skybound specifically, I think, is very good with talking to shops and doing cool shop things. Like, remember when United States of what's that weed book that came out? There was like a weed book that came out from Skybound,
Yeah.
and there was also Die Die Die,
oh,
which was like a surprise drop that was like a Kirkman, Chris Burnham book, I think.
Yeah.
So I think they work specifically with retailers very well. Not even Image as a whole, but specifically Skybound.
I feel like Scott Snyder did quite a bit of that too, especially in the early days.
Yep. Robert Kirkman is a perfect example of a grinder in comics. He understands, because Invincible and The Walking Dead didn't start off doing great numbers. He understands that the connection with the retailer is one of the major things that can help you sell books, because if they say, hey, we're going to push this Walking Dead thing and we're going to get it in the hands of, I don't know, 20 of our people, maybe that's 20 new people who then go online and talk about it and increase the profile of that comic book. Invincible is what it is today because of word of mouth and nothing else. It was already over when the show debuted. So no one can say, oh, it got the Walking Dead type bump. That's not the case. That's hard work on the creative team's part.
hustle.
Yeah. Moving forward in the positives, characters who've been in movies recently, like Miles, Gwen, and Spider-Punk, generated interest at shops, as did DC books mentioned by James Gunn as inspiring his new universe.
Yeah, we talked about that too. Like, surely there was going to be some sort of increase because he's been so chatty about that stuff.
Well, and we've talked about that since day one.
Yeah.
It's almost like when you have characters that exist in a
Yeah.
place already, you should be able to find them.
I almost hate how novel an idea that was, because it just makes sense to us, you know?
Yeah.
Even James Gunn recently, like, he just tweeted out hyping up DC's Eisner wins. You know, like,
Oh.
having someone that big, you know, just a tweet or a zeet or whatever the fuck is called right now.
Skeet, I
It's-
think it is.
Oh yeah, so James Gunn skeeted out this news, and like that's the most minimum amount of effort to do something, but I'm sure that helps sales across the board for collected stuff.
Yep.
James Gunn is a bigger name than every single comic book writer combined. So that'll definitely do it.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of people, by the way, sharing their stories in chat of their LCS experience and stuff like that. I love seeing that. Please keep it up. And I love the fact that you guys make the pilgrimage. That's a special thing that only we share with each other. What other industry is it that you do this kind of thing? You know, no one really goes anymore to be like, I gotta go get my DVDs for the week. You know, that's not really a thing anymore. This is the last
VHS.
bastion. You know, music used to make the trip to the music shop or Blockbuster or what have you. All that's done. Comics is the last one. So it's special to me. Evergreen graphic novel sales have been good, with owners like Jen King from Space Cadets Collection in Texas saying, quote, we can hardly keep evergreen graphic novels in stock. By the way, Jen King is awesome. I met her at New York Comic Con last year.
Nice.
But that's true, and we know that to be true about evergreen graphic novels, because when you go to any website, if you type in, you know, top 10 Batman books, it's always the same books. If you type in, you know, best Marvel stories, it's always the same ones. And so it's a repeating effect where the same books that have been selling are the ones that are going to keep selling, because those are the ones that everybody puts on those lists and talks about. And so they can't keep them on the stands.
I mean, a good problem to have, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
As long as they can keep as long as the publishers can keep pumping that out, then there's that piece of lifeline, I feel. And then at that point it becomes the job of the retailer to be like, hey, this is great, this is how you get deeper, this is how you continue the
Yeah.
story, this is. And that's where, again, bringing up Demetrius from Anyone Comics, that's what he does, right? That he comes in and he's like, oh yeah, you know what, you liked Invincible, well check it out, Robert Kirkman, the writer, did this, the artist XYZ did this. Like, you engage with the individual, you bring them back, you become that source, that point of trust for an individual, and that's customer service at the end of the day.
And I think a lot of the retailers that succeed, like Anyone Comics, they supplement with other stuff. Anyone Comics has drink and draw events. They have game nights, I believe, right?
Yep.
Yes.
So a lot of these comic shops that like just do comics, as much as it sucks, you can't just do comics at a comic book shop anymore. Um, you kind of have to have something else to supplement that. At least to succeed enough to even open up another shop. So
Yeah.
Especially if you are speaking about Western comics, right? Like, most of these places now have to sell manga as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. But they can't just sell, Marvel, DC, Image, take your pick. And, it is what it is. I guess different times call for different strategies. Unfortunately, though, those are the positives that I had. Those are the positives that I took out of this article for the state of comics right now. And
Long list.
yeah, and in years prior, the list has been longer. There have been more positives and good things to speak of. It seems as though the retailers are just down on selling comics, not necessarily even because sales are down. It's because everything is harder. And that's what I'm going to get into now. So retailers were asked, quote, what isn't working? And one owner said, everything is the succinct answer to this. And then they added, I don't remember seeing regular customers so despondent about what they're buying. Another,
What they're buying.
Right.
Wow.
right. It's weird. When you read the article, it's almost like the retailers are describing that buyers are like doing it because they do it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like
Natural.
zombies. They actually
Exactly
use,
how.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. It's exactly how it. We've talked about that. A lot of collectors will just come in and pick up Batman. You know, uh, and that's or all these people that pick up Spider-Man all the time, and then go online and bitch about it. It's just they come in and they pick it up, but there's no passion there. You know.
They've fallen into this like just habit of, well, I'm gonna go to the store, and I think because they also don't diversify as much, then to your point, KO, they limit themselves to, well, I'm only gonna read this batch and I don't like it, and so this is gonna be reflective of what I feel the industry is at, or the quality of books at X publisher is at, because, well, the ones that I've always gotten are no longer the same and feel different, and I don't like that, and I'm not willing to spend that extra dollar, or I guess extra $3-4 to go pick something else up that maybe I'll have a better time with, and change mindset.
Yeah, I can speak for myself. I mean, you guys know I buy a lot of comics, and the unfortunate reality is that I don't read a lot of them. Like, a lot of the books that I read don't get read because, it takes time to do it. And obviously, I have a responsibility to read a certain amount for the show as it is. But there are books that I read. I bought James Tynion's entire Batman run, and I don't know if I read a single issue. I'm not even sure.
Jeez.
Yep.
And with the amount of you have, who knows when you're going to get to that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Comic book, like Wednesday Warriors, are total masochist. And honestly, I think a lot of them like it. I think a lot, I think there is some weird pleasure with being able to complain about stuff that I think some Wednesday Warriors have, especially Spider-Man fans. But like I'm one of them. Like I don't collect physically, but I still have every physical issue of Saga, even the new ones. Like that's the only one I still
Yeah,
collect.
same.
And I'm behind. I'm behind like a whole arc right now.
Me
But
too.
yeah, comic fans are just built different, I think.
Well, but also I do think it speaks also to the quality of the material. You know, Zebwell stuff is good, but it's just Spider-Man stuff. You know, it's good if you come here for Spider-Man stuff, but what landmark stuff is happening in that book? You know, there aren't chances being taken.
I'm sorry.
There's no
Did you not see the death of Miss Marvel?
And then 3 days before I saw the death of Miss Marvel, I knew she was coming back because Marvel announced it and then brought back her whole. Whoa, I just got real mad about that. But like, you know, they're not taking chances, and then they're undercutting the chances that they take. So there's nothing there for anybody.
I'm going to go back to the negatives. And this is the first bullet point that I have. Single issues have been a hard sell, with readers seeming to be buying the books just because, as we just outlined, without much enthusiasm. And a lot of the big tentpole books haven't been working. Ultimate Invasion's price point hurt its sales. A lot of the retailers in this article talked about how Ultimate Invasion #1, being an $8.99 comic, made it so that they just couldn't justify ordering a ton of copies. And that a lot of people saw that price point and said, yeah, that's not happening, and put it down.
I will never buy an $8.99 floppy issue of a comic. That's insane.
It's bad.
Can't do it, dude. It's not worth the risk.
I used to buy the same Marvel trades at that price.
$2 more and you basically get an Image first trade. Like that's more value. That's the thing. It's a comparison between the value you get, and we talk about this all the time, of how disposable is that comic after you read it. Am I going to get maybe 64 pages, sure, of a bigger book, maybe bigger format, nice card stock, whatever, or I'll read 4 or 5 issues and get invested into potentially a series long term.
The one hit was Dawn of DC, the biggest hit coming out of the big two. Let's go. And even that comes with a downside. As enthusiastic as retailers were about that initiative, the fact that all of its titles are immediately going away for 2 months, so a line-wide horror event in Night Terrors can replace them, is enough to drive retailers mad. But Bruno Batista described it as, quote, not just shooting their own foot, they did it with a bazooka. It could cost the publisher all the gains they made during the beginning of Dawn of DC. Have we not discussed that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Had good momentum.
That's just dumb. It smacks of, we can do whatever we want. And a lot of the decisions that Marvel and DC make me feel like that. So imagine being a retailer. Let's establish something right now. Here's how the direct market works. I've said this many times, but there's always someone new listening. Stores order the books way in advance, and they pay for their copies. There is no returnability, or very limited returnability. And the returnability rules are very different for different publishers and different books and things like that. So what that means is that if Marvel sells the $8.99 Ultimate Invasion to a shop, and whatever price the shop pays, like let's say they pay $4 or whatever, they're not getting that back if they can't sell their copies of Ultimate Invasion. Marvel made their money. So that means that Marvel, in this case, has retailers by the short hairs. We're going to sell you this book. You're going to buy it because you don't want to miss out. It could be hot. It could be the biggest thing ever. You don't know. But if it's not, it doesn't matter to us because we already sold it. So retailers have to eat that. And think about this. If you're a Wednesday warrior, you go to the shop, what are you looking for? The newest book. What happens to the books that don't sell from the week before? At my LCS, which is enormous, they just get put on a lower shelf. But at other LCSs that aren't as big, they get put in the back. How do you sell that shit?
Can't. Like, it's hard because then people got to go diving for that. And I don't think that that's a I don't think that's a way to engage a customer, because going through back issues, that's stuff that, you're like deep in already into the culture. You got to go digging through long boxes and filtering whatever, but someone new is like, oh, that looks like a lot. I'm not going to do that. I need accessibility.
I want to take a moment to address this comment from Who That Pro 7297. Welcome. I've not seen your name before, so thank you for joining us. I'm looking to get into comics, but still figuring out the best way to go about it. Is it better to buy online? I think that depends a lot on the kind of person you are and where you live. So buying comic books can be daunting for some people. If you are not necessarily comfortable going to a shop and not knowing what you're there to buy, and browsing, then it might be better to start online just to sort of get a feel for what books you like, what you don't like, and the state of things, and then take it from there. If you've got an LCS near you, which you can look up online, then you can go there and check it out, scope it out, see if you like the selection. It's, in my opinion, it's better to go knowing what you want. That way you have an idea of what you're there to buy, so it removes some of that anxiety of being a new person and not knowing what you want. And you can see if the vibe is right. And if the vibe is right, then you've got a home. And if it's not, try again somewhere else or stick to online. I think that's probably the safest way to go about it, but your mileage may vary. Do you guys want to add to that at all?
Yeah, if you're doing online, I would stick to physical if you're a physical buyer doing issue by issue, because you're paying the same amount digitally. So, you might as well have the physical copy. But as far as like getting into history and older collections and like the good stuff, you can get, the Marvel Unlimited or the DC Infinite, or you could try Comixology Unlimited, but I wouldn't recommend it. And get those subscriptions at, their monthly, $7.99 or whatever it is. And you'll get, decades of backlog that will, fill you in on characters you like. And, you'll get that deep history of just all the stuff that you are interested in. And you can, and, each of them have curated lists of the good stuff to read. So those are great places to start for all that.
Agreed.
Ooh, Matt makes a great point in the chat. Don't forget about your local library either.
That's a good point.
Libraries freaking love introducing people to comics.
Underrated comment. Yeah, absolutely. Marvel was specifically called out as a problem. Quote, much of its line, particularly its incessant minis with no clear audience, are unmovable. And that's the biggest publisher in the direct market.
Interesting. The minis.
Yeah.
I just read all of Hollow's Eve, that mini by Erica Schultz based on that character from the Dark Web event, and like it was good, but like they're right. Who was that for? Like it's 5 issues. It just finished. Who knows when we're gonna see the character again? They kind of tease it at the end, like, oh, there's an annual coming up and there's a special coming up later. But like 5 issues, I would rather read that in a trade, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like I just binged it. The 5th issue just came out this week, so I read all of it this week. But yeah, I can't imagine that reading that once a month.
And I think that's more accessible to people. Is I'm gonna have a single book instead of getting them into this rhythm of gotta come back and for all 5 issues. Like if that's the bar for entry for people to want to read, I think that there needs to be like a rethinking of it, because one, is it worth publishing individual floppies? I'm assuming that's more expensive over the course of publication than it is to do a single trade. Yeah, and you can make that work a bit better, more cost effective, and at that point you're have a better product for the consumer as well. And also, I put up a poll on if anybody reads previews for comics. We had a question in the chat, so curious on that one.
Interesting. Yeah, update us on that a little bit later, Marco.
Does previews cost anything?
That's a good question. I don't think so,
The
but
book itself, I don't think.
I don't read it. I have no idea.
I've never bought it. Yeah, or I've never read it. However,
I don't even know if I've looked at it.
Yeah. I mean, to what Marco's saying though, right? Like those minis that you could theoretically publish as trades. The fact that the individual issues are hard to sell doesn't matter to Marvel. It only matters to retailers. There is no risk involved for Marvel. They made their money already if retailers decide to order it. But when you look at these books, it's like, yeah, okay, cool. I'm grateful that Erica Schultz got a shot. She's actually really cool. Seen her a lot at Comic-Con. I don't care about Hallows Eve, and I don't have a reason to buy it. It's not interesting to me. You know, you establish that character somewhere else, make sure she's hot, prove it, give me a great creative team, and then I'll show up. But I'm not going to buy, I wouldn't even buy the trade. Why would I even buy the trade? We're talking about like a $3.99 investment over 5 issues versus a $20 investment in one shot. I'll give a first issue a shot of pretty much anything, but I'm not going to buy a $20 trade sight unseen, unproven, especially not on a creative team that doesn't have the biggest names. There's no way. No way.
It's a tough balance
Yeah.
at that point.
I think
Classy.
Spiral Storm in the chat said hot take. I think they should get rid of floppies. If they do that, then characters like Hallows Eve won't exist. You know what I mean? Like you kind of need them to launch new characters. Nobody's buying a $25 book for a character they never heard of before.
But nobody's buying Hallows Eve either. Like, they're shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic.
You lose kind of either way to some degree.
I think the problem is that publishers and retailers would be even less likely to take risks. And we would see even more Batman, even more, Spider-Man. When you look at Black Label, which is the most expensive line of comics in comics, almost all of those books are Batman. And there's a reason for that. It's because people won't gamble on things that are that they're not sure about. But when you say Batman, Scott Snyder, for example, Greg Capullo, Black Label, sure bet. Let's move a little bit forward because I want to talk a little bit about the non-Big Two. So non-Big Two publishers have struggled tremendously in the single issue market, with even some number ones not selling well enough to give retailers a reason to order number 2. And again, this isn't just a problem for the smallest publishers. As Pratt, one of the retailers, told me, a bunch of titles from Image, Boom, Dark Horse, and lower publishers only sell 1 to 3 copies each issue. The retailer noted that even top names like Scott Snyder and Jeff Lemire exist within that range. This is effectively an everyone problem. Quote, we love supporting new and innovative materials, but at a time when ordering a new Batman series feels risky, ordering a new small publisher book from unknown creators often feels downright foolish.
We got a super chat from Atomic Hound, so thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much.
In the midst of chores while listening, but you guys are killing it today. So thank you so much for your candor and objectivity. That's what we're here for, buddy.
You got that right. Really, really appreciate that.
I'm too stupid to know what candor means, but thank you.
Honesty.
Isn't that the planet on Star Wars where the Wookiees come from?
No,
No, that's
Candor is
Kashyyyk.
Candor is that new show they had with
Wow.
with
Oh my god.
Oh,
heard it was good. Heard it was good.
Candor. Oh man, that's funny. Yeah, thank you so much again, Atomic Hound. And of course, that is a reminder that super chats are open if you feel like you want to contribute and support if you're enjoying this. We have 30 people watching us live right now. That's so cool.
Nuts.
Thank you all for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. I want to see those likes bump up. We're going to do a draft today. Nothing will stop us from doing a draft as long as we hit the likes goal. We got 30 people watching right now. I feel like we can make 25. I feel
let's
like
make 30.
okay. All right. 30. 30 for 30.
Sean, one thing that you mentioned with like there really not being any shelf space for new creators and stuff is like a lot of new creators I see, like they're going on Kickstarter. That's where it is. It's
Yeah.
like they have retailer incentives, but
Mhm.
like that's usually for specific retailers that they might have a relationship with or might be friends with the creator. It is almost direct to consumer in terms of the space for new creators, really.
Even the fucking publishers are going to Kickstarter.
Mm,
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Did you guys
Like-
kickstart the Keanu Reeves book?
Hell no.
No, I
no, but I bought Berserker.
yeah.
And actually, to continuing that point, Michelle Fuss, who Sean and I interviewed, totally independent webcomic, like also started on Kickstarter and is reintroducing people now via Skybound, because you can continue that cycle, that build.
Yeah. I mean, look, this is very anecdotal, but we get criticized for not doing more non-big 2 stuff, but almost every single time that I do a poll, which we do every single week on Twitter or X or whatever, the books that don't have big names or big characters on them don't get votes. Like that's our audience. That's not like random people wherever. That's our core audience that are not voting for books that don't have creators or characters that they know.
And even the books that are independent by the creators we know, your big names, your Scott Snyder, your Jeff Lemire, they've put so many books out that we know what that number one's going to look like.
Right.
And we've criticized that on the show several times.
Yeah.
So, I don't necessarily blame audiences for not coming back to a store for that. It doesn't surprise me that a Scott Snyder would only sell 1 or 2 copies in his book about, female prisoners who are also firefighters. Like it's an interesting concept, but it's also a Scott Snyder. Like I probably know what that's going to look like.
Yeah. So I gave the poll about 10 minutes. We've netted out at 57% no and 43 yes.
Wow.
That's a lot closer than I thought it
Oh,
would be.
sorry. 57-42. Yeah.
I'm surprised by that.
So, yeah, because all 4 of us are no. If it was just a Comics Pals participant poll, it'd be 0 to 100.
All right, let's move forward. It's gotten harder to do this job. With the various distributors who have their own systems, retailers have to work harder to get their orders in and learn new systems, while still dealing with the problems they had before. Penguin Random House packages comics well, but other distributors have issues with it. What am I saying when I say that? Diamond Comics, the only game in town for decades, sucked at packaging comics. That was their job. And they sucked at it. Penguin Random House came in 2021, or maybe I think it was 21, and they've gotten flying colors from the retailer polls about who packages comics the best. Comics that come in with bent edges, unsellable in a collector's
Water
market.
damage.
Water damage, absolutely.
That's wild.
The thing there is, Diamond was the only shop in town, so they just got complacent. They probably just don't care. Whereas Penguin, they're a book publisher, so they have competition all over. So they have to learn to make what they do stand out. And I guess they're just, kind of, those practices kind of, fell over into the comic book sphere.
The price of comics is too damn high. Jen King, who I referenced earlier, said, I think people are price blind for individual comics, but not to the final register tally. I have that problem.
Yeah.
I don't look at the price of the books that I buy. But when I get rung up, I'm like, what the hell just happened?
I feel it.
It's insane.
It also doesn't help that there aren't prices posted, right? They're on the book, but if they were on, a little tag or something like Walmart, like you'd sure know.
Image
Right.
prices aren't even on the front; they're on the back of the book.
Yeah.
Smart thinking.
Good stuff.
Joe Field said, he's seen customers use $9.99 quote anniversary issues as not a moment of celebration but a jumping off point. Someone in the chat referenced that earlier.
Ooh.
Those $9.99 books. I don't buy them anymore. They're a joke. There's no. Why would I spend $10 on an anniversary book that features a ton of creators telling stories that don't matter, that I don't care about, for $10?
Look at Fallen Friend. How much was Fallen Friend that came out?
Oh,
I'm not sure.
$7.99.
Next week, the following week, she's back.
Awful.
Like it's wild.
Awful.
Oh, $4.99 apparently.
All right, so let me get through the rest of these negatives. It's the same, quote, it's the same basic issue that we've been faced with for almost the past 3 years now, said Brower. There's so much extra work for no extra income. In fact, looking at 2023 sales, it's way more work for less money. So that's in reference to the problems of all these different distributors. And keep in mind what that means. When you're working with just Diamond's system is the only system you're working with, good or bad, it doesn't matter. When you add in Penguin Random House, Lunar, UCS, all these different distributors that have their own systems, their own databases that you have to work with, you're a retailer, you might not even know really how to deal with all that. A lot of these people have been retailing for 30, 40 years, dealing with one system. These are oftentimes older people who are not necessarily as connected to technology and don't have the time to sit there and learn new systems. And yet they've had to do it several times over the last 3 years. So every week is a new problem. And they're not getting paid more for this.
And you can only get certain books through certain retailers, distributors rather. And so you have to learn each individual system because otherwise you're not going to get your Marvel book, you're not going to get your DC book, you're not going to get your Image and everything else.
Exactly.
Man, that sucked. Dude. Imagine you like flipping through tabs just to make orders. Like, no.
It's horrible. This was a big point that was made. Major publishers don't listen to the concerns of the retailers. Quote, at this stage, you can just go back to all our answers from the past few years, collate them together, and realize that practically nothing has changed. My wish for this year is that the chasm between what publishers put out and what we can actually sell gets smaller. Big publishers seem to take zero input from us here on the front line, and that doesn't seem likely to change anytime soon.
Look at the most recent retailer meeting at San Diego Comic-Con. Like, one of the biggest complaints that we hear is the variant issue. And what was their big announcement? More variants. Like, they're completely out of touch with what retailers want.
Well, I think you can even extrapolate that further to the strikes. Nobody's listening. Nobody cares. It's all about the dollar. It's all about the bottom line.
Yeah.
Put out the public so that, we can keep those couple of cents.
And do variants sell? Yeah, they do sell. Yes. But we've talked about this ad nauseum on this show. That's a scam. It's a scam.
Yeah.
And the industry is being propped up by a scam.
It's inflating the numbers. And and that doesn't benefit the long term because then you start to rely on it instead of making it something momentous. And that I think I think you can do something better at that level of, okay, maybe you do it once a year because there's like for sure an actual important issue that's coming out, and then you build moments around it, and that's how you build emotional connections to get consumers back versus, well, I know that every issue is going to have a variant. Why do I care about these things? I know, all right, fine, sure, there's a cool artist, I'll pick that up, but otherwise it doesn't provide that value.
Imagine being a comic book creator, right? Not the variant cover artist. I'm not talking about that person. I'm talking about the two individuals I'm sorry. The creative team overall that worked on the book. And your book does great. Sells really nicely. But it had a Frank Miller variant that everybody wanted. And so the book sold really well, but a lot of people bought that Frank Miller variant. How many of the people who bought your comic actually read it?
Or are coming back for issue 2.
Or are coming back for issue 2? How must that feel? Knowing that you're busting your ass as a creator to make this book, and the only reason why it's selling so well is because it's got a really snazzy Frank Miller variant. And I'm just using the name. It's not a knock against Frank or anything like that. And it wouldn't be a knock against any of them. These are tremendous artists whose work sells copies. But that's a problem in and of itself because that work is not inside the book.
Yep.
I imagine Blade is probably a victim of this, Like, Blade had that, one of the first Frank Miller variants recently.
Right.
I'm sure the sales for Blade 1 are going to be very different from the sales of Blade 2. For a book that, Cal and I genuinely liked.
It was pretty good.
So, yeah.
It's pretty good. And it's worth saying, this is how the industry imploded before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Spiral said maybe we're in for a 90s repeat. I think we're absolutely going for it.
Yeah.
Or we just work Frank Miller to the bone and just have him do all the covers.
They're already doing that. The man's fucking, he could barely lift his head to hold up that fedora.
That's weighing him down.
Scraping out that trashy Wolverine he did.
Now, I saved the most damning quote for last because I think that this, unfortunately, is true. I do believe this. And I hate to say it, but I'm not going to say it. I'm going to let Bruno Batista of Dublin's Big Bang Comics say it. Quote, 70% of the publishers could disappear tomorrow, and 90% of the customers wouldn't even notice.
Oh, God. That's sad.
And of course it's true. When most people think that comics is only Marvel and DC, and then The Walking Dead and Saga, not even naming the publisher, just the actual book.
Yep.
You mean to tell me you think that the average person, even the average comic shop goer, knows Aftershock or AWA? Yep. No. All the hype about Distillery. How does the average person at a comic book shop know that Distillery is a thing? They don't.
They probably barely know Marvel and DC are a thing. Like, the average reader, if that, only cares about the IP. I'm here to pick up Flash. Yeah. Oh, Power Rangers, they're around, right?
I bet you the average reader doesn't even know creative teams. Like,
oh yeah,
they're just looking at the characters, really. Like, I bet you they don't know when there's a new creative team switch over to new things.
Shoot, a lot of times I don't even, just because I'm such a zombie that I'll just go to the store and buy it, and then I'm like, oh snap, I didn't even realize that, like Venom, like, oh snap, I didn't even realize the creative team changed. It happened to me when Donny Cates left Thor and Hulk, where I was like, oh snap, Donnie's gone, didn't know. So, go ahead.
Sorry, how much of that though are people who are invested into comics already? Like we'll recognize it. I'm sure a number of our audience will recognize that, but the what percentage of that population is a new reader? Like, realistically, of all the people that buy comics, I would say, I don't have numbers, right? This is just an anecdotal assumption, but I'd say maybe like 10-15% of those people actually who go into a shop might not know that, but everybody else, like us, we'd probably know. We'd recognize those things.
But we are the most activated comic book readers there are.
That's what I mean. Is I think it's more impactful to us, and that population is smaller. They make up a smaller portion of the people actually buying comics.
By they, you mean casual readers?
Yeah.
I guess it depends on what you define as casual, because if someone is a Marvel and DC loyalist and they go every week and all they buy is Marvel and DC, and they love Spider-Man but they don't care about Zeb Wells or Ramita or whoever, are they casual?
No, they're locked in.
Right, but they don't necessarily care who's writing the book. They don't know about an Image or a Boom. They don't care. And we can see that because we can see the numbers. Well, we can't see the numbers anymore, but we know that outside of the big two, single issues are a struggle. We just talked about it. So where are the people that are buying those books? They're not here. So am I less casual? Am I more locked in than a person who only buys Marvel and DC because I go deeper, even though we're at the shop the same amount of time every week? There are levels to it. And to me, if you go to the shop every week, you're not casual. But that doesn't mean you care about non-big two books.
Sure.
And it also doesn't mean that you care about the creative team.
Dan in the chat says, I think you guys are a bit off on that. I think the average comic book reader knows creative teams more than, say, film goers know directors.
More than, but that doesn't disprove what we said. I don't think that disproves it. I think if that were true, then Scott Snyder books would always sell well, but they don't. We just talked about that. It's almost like, yeah, Scott Snyder's books sold tremendously well when he was writing Batman. Why? Because the books were good. Because there was intrigue, there was excitement, people were into it. We know that there is some amount of people who will follow Scott to his other books, but I just said that a Scott Snyder book might sell 1 to 3 copies at some stores. That's not a Batman. So clearly people don't care. There are people who don't even know what publisher publishes a Spider-Man book. Go ahead.
Sorry, Matt. He says growth for me, but I'm a bit exhausted by the casual label. It's just gatekeeping people from opening up to what they like and want to share from you read in the future.
I don't think casual in that sense is a derogatory thing. I think we're talking from a retailer perspective, where casual means the person that only comes in casually.
Like,
Yeah,
less
you know?
activated.
Yeah.
It could be foot traffic,
Sure.
Like,
I don't. Yeah.
for my comic shop, I would be a casual person because I only go in twice a year.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm a casual comic shop goer as well, even though I do a weekly comic book podcast. So, but at the same time, I will gladly gatekeep.
Wow.
Piece of shit.
So I wanted to end this conversation with something that, in the chat, Dan Trudeau wrote up in our Discord server, which everyone is welcome to join. As long as you are a cool person, we would love to have you. I like to say we've got the best comics community Discord around, and I like to think that the people that are on it would agree with that. And so Dan, one of our very, very loyal supporters and listeners, wrote up an incredible piece that he describes as what would save comics. And so to close out, I thought we would analyze this and kind of, dissect it. And before we get into it, Dan consented to this. So,
So we're not going to see him in the chat going, hey, what the...
All right, so this is what Dan said, and there are aspects of it that are abbreviated just because of what we do here. Uh, Monthly comic books were never prestige entertainment products from the retailer perspective. The first step of saving comics is to accept this and steer into it. If the publishers are serious about growing their customer base, they need to once again market and sell them in a space that makes sense. My suggestion is to bring back the spinner rack in stores such as CVS, Rite Aid, Duane Reade, local stores, etc. The market is kids in the stores with their parents, or parents who tell their kids they'll get them something while picking up prescriptions or whatever they're out for. A couple of things have to be in place for this to be successful. The comics cannot cost more than $3 an issue, ideally $2. They have to feature good stories by solid creative teams, not the generic stuff they often sell to kids. The books have to advertise their premium titles, graphic novels and $7 issues, etc., and where to get them. They have to be all age stories, which doesn't mean stupid or overly simple. There has to be more than superheroes, almost aimed at a more diverse crowd. There has to be a sustained marketing effort on TV, movies, etc. They need to announce to kids that they need to seek out the spinner rack for great stories with their favorite characters. The trick is, the program will be expensive up front and will take a bit to gain the volume required to make it profitable. It will also need tweaking as it goes along. That said, I honestly believe it could be the cornerstone to building readership back up again. This won't make comics as big as they used to be. Nothing is as big as it used to be. This will keep it from dying, build up a fan base for these characters that's more sustainable than other media, help create a place where the corporations can try out ideas, characters, etc. for adaptation and licensing in a less expensive space, lower risk with high reward. Comics could remain their R&D divisions that not only pay for themselves but turn a profit. As of today, I don't know if you can motivate Warner Brothers Discovery and Disney to fund this sort of initiative, but it's the sort of path I think would be necessary to right the comics industry ship. You can't make up for the lost ground, the lost generation of readers Didio mentioned, without serious investment. Well written. Dan is a tremendous writer in general. What do you guys have to say about this?
I think he's
thing-
right.
Please.
Yeah, I think he's right in the sense that I think that the price needs to go down. Even if the price goes down and page count also goes down, I think that's still the right move. As annoying as that is for probably creators. I personally love spinner racks, so I would like to see them come back. But with the amount of people who also shop for groceries online at this point, I don't know how much that will help. I think investing in like a digest type thing that could be on, what do you call it? Like when you're at the cash register, that area for a lot of places could work.
The checkout?
Yeah, there's a name for that. There's like a retail name for that. Like the impulse buy section.
I know. Yeah.
So yeah, I think having it in stores that aren't just comic book shops could help. I know Barnes and Noble even stopped doing comic books. I used to curate the comic book section, the floppy section, when I worked at the Barnes and Noble. But that doesn't even exist anymore. But yeah, there's a lot of good thoughts here. The thing is, I don't think Disney or Warner Brothers cares. Like all that is right now is just the IP farm for their other media. So.
Well, the other thing that appeals to me out of what he said too is market them toward kids, because kids will buy as much as the money they have in their pockets will get them. The problem is the companies see us millennials as, the new working driving customer, so they're vomiting out, ancient nostalgia brands, the Barbie movie, a glow-in-the-dark Ninja Turtle Funko Pop, so that we will get that so we can relive our childhood. And ostensibly, we have more money, even though we're the ones that are struggling.
Yeah, but at that point, I feel like I would push back on the kid piece. I think you can cater the books like that, but then they're not the ones that are going to be driving sales. Like, they don't have the disposable income to be able to go. Like, maybe you'll get an issue or two, but they're not the people going into the the store and coming out with a total amount of $100 plus.
See,
And
I disagree, Marco, because of the child labor laws that we're getting rid of in the U.S. They're going to have money soon.
Well, and the problem with that though, Tyler, is you have to remember soon that's going to be just child slavery. So
True, and they're dying in those labor
Right.
positions too, so
It's
they
getting
can't stop. They're dead.
incredibly dark.
Yep, that's
making-
US for you.
making my glow in the dark Ninja Turtle.
but I think I don't know that that's a sector of the market that you can then grow. You're going to be,
Oh, I wholly disagree.
but in terms of the kids coming up and giving you money, like they're not the ones that are gonna, they're not the ones that are working those jobs, and whatever. The jokes aside, right now, right? But
They don't have the money, you mean?
they don't have the money. It's us. Like we're the ones that will. A parent does. You have to convince the parent to buy the book for the kid. As much as the kid goes, "Hey, I want this thing," right? They'd be, it's not on the budget, bud.
So you're saying comics needs the Bluey model. They need to market to kids, but it's something that adults can also enjoy at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
But I to that point, I think old comics used to do that. You know, there's wow, what was it? Was it Watchmen, where the kids are the TV show where the kids are reading like Superman comics or something,
Maybe.
and one of them throws it away, and the adult nearby that the story is actually following sees it, and he picks it up, and he's like, oh well, I'll just see what the kids are reading, but he's actually a big fan. I don't think that's not true.
I would say, including where the kid market makes sense is in that on that scholastic piece, like where they go into school, it makes it accessible. There's a model built in where the expectation is, oh, I need to have some money ready because I know I'm gonna go buy these books, and then from there you get the people to be like, hey, I'm gonna to sell that in. I think that's where you can get the kids to that point, but on the retailer end, that has to be specific, I think, to people with disposable income.
I think what Dan's positing here is a return to what comics originally was, like the big two comics originally was. And my fear is that, all right, well then in 30, 40 years we'll just be back to where we are. Like you're kind of getting kids into collecting comics so that when they're older, they have that disposable income. They're the ones kind of being these Wednesday warriors that pick up every book that Marvel puts out because they have the money for it. But then I feel like we just be back to where we are now later in the line.
But I'd argue you have to make them fans now of every book, and they're probably not going to
Sure.
be reading every book. And to that, I think you used to be able to do that previously because those books were cheaper. And to Dan's point in his write up, like that would be the addressable piece. But then you have to think about how that works practically, and that's decreasing quality of cardstock, decreasing paper quality, maybe even doing black and white books.
The other thing that's different though is attention span. Like,
Huh?
an iPad kid is not reading comics. I'm sorry. What their media intake is not coming from any kind of paper medium, really, as horrible as that sounds. But like they're more interested in TV shows, more interested in the movies. If Marvel can put out their own Encanto, then we might be onto something. But I don't think that exists in the comic book space.
I'm going to jump in here. So I love what Dan wrote, and I think that there are definitely truths in it because it's, of course, how could that not be the case? Dan, the truth, Trudeau. But I think that the world has moved on from the days of kids being the activated readership of physical floppy comics. Yes, kids do read. We know they read. We know they read manga. We know that, they read Raina Telgemeier, and we know they read Dogman and things like that. But those are scholastic, oftentimes, as Marco pointed out, and you're getting a lot of bang for your buck when you buy something like that. Comic books are no longer built to be cheap and disposable. Right. And I think that going back to that style actually might hurt comics. I also think that we are in an age where a $2, $3 comic is not going to have a profit margin that will sustain a creative team. People got to get paid. We've talked a lot about how in the manga space there are problems with pay and there are problems with overwork. And those are $10, $20, whatever they are. I don't know the cost of like a Naruto volume, but I thought they were around $10. Yeah.
Like
It's like a chapter. It's like Marco, like a 50-page chapter you can get, which would be the equivalent of a new issue for
the
10
individual
bucks.
ones.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like but not the tankobons.
Man, come on.
Tankobon is just a collected one. Versus you're saying like the 17, 18 page individual issue.
Is that all they are?
They're small, dude. Yeah.
Oh, fucking hell.
I'm talking about the volumes that like those thick volumes
The
that
thick
I
ones.
see at
Kale, tankobons. Okay. Those are like maybe like anywhere from $8 to $10.
Thank you.
Live in England.
So that's the equivalent today's comic price of two single issues. That is a god awful value proposition. There isn't enough value in a comic book, a single issue comic book, for a retailer to host it. Like, outside of direct market comic book shops, or for parents to buy it for their kids at that price point. The value isn't really there. And on top of that, like I said, you have the issue of paying creators what they're worth, which they're already not being paid what they're worth. And the price of comics keeps going up and up and up and up. So I think that appealing more to kids is definitely a piece of the puzzle. And as Dan pointed out, this is not his solution to fixing comics overall. It's just a piece of it. So I do agree that it's a piece of it. But I think that floppies are not the way. I have advocated for stuff like, how come there's not Miles Morales scholastic Dogman style ongoing tales for children to read?
Yep.
You hit that, that middle grade region and turn them into activated readers in the future, you hope. But more than that, it's like, hey, Dogman's popular, Miles Morales is popular. One of those characters has a television show. I don't know if Dogman does. I know Miles does. That show's popular with kids. There should be material to supplement that, and that should be everywhere. But I don't know if I feel like you can do how they used to do, like, what's a good example? Like, I don't know that Aquaman would be, like, I think that the characters that you could use to appeal to children in this space is shockingly low compared to the way it used to be. And I think it's going to be based a lot on the MCU. But once you move past what has a movie or a television show, I think it gets really hard, just like it is now for adults.
I think to your point, one of the other pieces is that scholastic format does not translate to the LCS, and that's where you're going to get that next level of reader.
Right.
And you're not building the habit, you're not building the understanding that, oh, if you want to get the next series, you want to continue to explore more, it's not going to be here in where I'm familiar. You have to enter a new environment.
Yeah.
And that's not being translated.
I agree. We've got a problem in comics, as was outlined here. There are many possible solutions. We've outlined a few, especially thanks to Dan. I appreciate you allowing us to use this. Until publishers get serious about, acknowledging the problems, there's nothing that anyone else can do. Retailers can't get it done. They get the bulk of the blame. Everybody shits on retailers. But they don't really have the capacity to solve this problem. Distributors don't have the capacity to solve the problem. Publishing initiatives are the only thing that can truly solve this problem. And I think it comes down to not insulting our intelligence with gimmicks and BS that doesn't go anywhere. Being a lot more choosy about what you publish. Connecting with retailers to tell them how to market these books. providing them with material. Why aren't there Ultimate Invasion standees? You know, if that's your big thing that you're trying to pump this summer, where's the merchandise surrounding that makes it cool? I should come away with a little pin or something. DC has the fucking... I got a lantern ring right here that I got from DC. You know, that's pretty cool. They just gave it to me. It was free.
That provides more value.
Of course.
You get a better bang for your buck.
Yeah. I
Be a
still have
poster.
it. I thought it was nice. I liked it. More interconnectivity with the movies and television shows. These things are popular. Lean into that. I'm not saying it should be 1-to-1. I'm just saying that if Miles Morales is popping, then maybe the creative team that's doing the main Miles book should be a driver of sales. And maybe there should be a bunch of kids' Miles Morales books out there. And yeah, comic books are too expensive. And I don't know how to deal with that. Because you can't really lower the prices and still be able to have creators feed themselves and their families. At least that's what
Bro,
it seems
everything's
like.
too expensive right now.
Yeah.
No, you know how expensive my avocado toast is in the morning?
I'm out here trying to get a cup of coffee, and they won't let me buy a house. Chillmonger brings up an interesting point. I don't know if I am wholly with him, but he mentions that they just sold Hulk number 181 to us for $4, and they didn't have to pay a creative team. So his overall point is, you know, reprint the important stuff. You know, Hulk 181 is the issue where we meet Wolverine. Reprint that stuff, and you also don't have to pay the creative, the creative team,
That-
here and there.
Isn't that the
That's-
Roy Thomas editor-in-chief way of dealing with X-Men? Like, didn't he do something like that? Where
Yeah.
X-Men were constantly reprinted?
Yes, and that was something that Jeanette Kahn fought against at DC because she felt that
That's right.
constantly reprinting the books would take the interest away from the titles that they were publishing in the here and now. It's worth pointing out, though, that facsimile editions do well. And they don't come with those same costs like you outlined.
Also, that's primarily the European market, especially for Tintin and Asterix. You know, the guy who did Tintin's been dead for years and years, but they recycle the same 20 stories in, big collections, and, you can get the individual albums for, a certain amount, and they're all really nice, and they are the top sellers all the time.
That's where we're going to have to leave it. This has been quite a long conversation. I sincerely appreciate the live chat engagement. You guys are phenomenal.